Sponsored by Skillshare. I learn a lot from Linus Tech Tips. His opinions are often very different than my own, but he's incredibly knowledgeable and passionate, and whether I ultimately end up agreeing with him or not, the process forces me to evaluate, reevaluate, and learn. And that's absolutely the case with one of his latest videos, Macs are slower than PCs, and why. So, is that true or is that just his point of view? Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and Canadian Mountie Punch that bell gizmo so you don't miss any of the upcoming deep dives. And then let's find out. I'm Rene Ritchie, and this is Vector. Now, first, please keep in mind that I am a long-time MacBook Pro user and someone who generally values the trade-offs Apple makes. So that's my bias. But I'm going to try to keep this as balanced and as fair as I possibly can, and I'll trust you to shout at me in the comments if and when I get anything wrong. So the crux of Linus's video, and I'll link to the whole thing in the description, as well as the Reddit thread, which has some great discussion on it, its thesis is the question, why Macs are slower than PCs? Now, Linus is the benchmark master here, not me. So for general evaluation, I'm gonna go with what he said in his previous video about the current generation MacBook Pro.
Our 2018 MacBook Pro, with the fix applied, closely matches or even beats our other Core i9 machines in CPU-heavy workloads like Adobe Premiere and Blender.
Link to the whole thing in the description. Mac-targeted title of the video aside, what Linus is really arguing here, or at least one of the major arguments he's making, is that despite the prices being pretty much the same, spec for spec, between Mac and PC,
Macs often don't perform as you would expect given their specifications.
He's all hubba hubba over the design and the specs, but feels, and this is a totally familiar refrain, that the designs, or in his words,
in the pursuit of sex appeal, they often don't do those sometimes very impressive specs justice.
Linus shows some stress tests and says
Apple's done a little bit of trickery here,
adjusting the voltage and fan curves so that they can hit a higher thermal threshold without throttling too far below Intel's advertised base clock. I'll quibble with this part a little. What he calls trickery I think would far better be called management. Given the form factors involved, managing processor speeds to manage temperature just makes the kind of sense it does. Linus points out that this management disappears under Boot Camp for Windows, and there was an early bug that prevented it from working and caused a ton of controversy on the Mac as well. But that was fixed pretty damn quick. Still, Linus asks again,
or is it just software trickery to mask a bad design?
But here's the thing. It's part of the design. Apple's whole thing since the beginning has been about software, hardware, capability, and design all working together. All design is compromise. All engineering is trade-offs. A giant thermally unmanaged battleship you can't easily enjoyably carry around or use unplugged is also compromised, just differently compromised. The high order bit, and they said it on Reddit, is this: sustained speed, reduced noise, or realistic portability. Pick two. But the next highest, the one that people don't talk about as much, is this. In some cases, you can manage, mitigate, and even engineer the hard edges off of your compromise. Now, Linus says,
would a laptop PC achieve these results? And in fairness, the answer in many cases is no.
That makes it sound more like a why are thin PCs slow video rather than anything particularly Mac exclusive. Linus also points out all of this has been exacerbated by Intel's multi-year failure to shrink their process down to 10 nanometer, and they're compensating by, once again, throwing more cores at the problem, resulting in higher temperatures that manufacturers have to try and over-prepare for. Which, again, can totally be done, but not without those other different compromises on the aforementioned noise and portability or dependency on AC rather than battery power. Some people might prefer those other compromises, other people decidedly not. Because here's the thing, not all customers are the same. We all have different needs, certainly, but also different priorities and even just different tastes. Now, on the internet, we have a very special name for people who have different preferences than our own: idiots. Yeah, it's funny because it's true. If you like Macs and iPhones, you just don't understand how people can deal with those ugly, incoherent Android or Windows boxes. Likewise, if you like Android or Windows, you just don't get how anyone can put up with those locked-down, design-constrained iPhone and Mac boxes. It's not like we're even speaking different languages. It's like all of our brains are just wired differently, and they are. On the internet, we just get super tribal and shorthand that down to everyone else being, idiots. Linus explains just as much when he says that.
It seems to be because, for a large enough a proportion of their customers, the looks and the status symbol of owning the machine are just more important than whether it's actually quick off the line.
And I get it, I totally get it. And for exactly the reasons I just mentioned. Apple isn't solving for just one attribute or just one percentage of the customer space. They're trying to solve for multiple attributes to balance power with portability and quietness in a durable and nicely designed package. Apple is managing for thermal, sure, like other vendors, more in most cases. They've been doing it for years, and so far, there's no real-world evidence to suggest it's been a problem, not at all. But Apple has also been engineering around it by including top-of-the-line SSD and custom controllers. They're even including custom silicon like the T2 chip in more and more models, which handles security and device control, but which also helps with performance in several ways, from encryption speed to encode and decode. Because, and you know it's true because it's already a cliche, it's not the specific number or the benchmark that really matters when you own the machine. It's the overall speed you experience every day while using it. There are certainly some customers who prioritize aesthetics and want people to see Apple computers on their desks, in their bags, at their reception areas, in the coffee shops, and throughout their offices. The same way they want specific chairs and paintings and lights and whatever. But even then, it's not like that brand value just magically appeared. Apple's nailed that part. Hard. So hard an entire generation of other notebooks have raced to follow Apple's design lead. And that's not a knock. That's credit, or blame depending on how you feel, where it's due. For others, it's the materials like aluminum and glass and their durability over time. Point being, everyone has their own idea of overall value. Linus goes on to say that the advent of Turbo Boost has
masked Apple's negligence.
He says Turbo Boost allows Macs to
feel pretty snappy in day-to-day use, but require literal water cooling to reach peak performance in heavy workloads.
But again, I'll quibble with his characterization. The vast majority of people don't want or need a literally water-cooled MacBook Pro. They want and need exactly the snappy day-to-day one Linus mentions. For them, Turbo Boost works as intended. It's a great way to address a wide swath of bursty workflows that benefit from exactly that kind of performance. Things like opening apps, which in the age of SSD is no longer I/O bound, browsing the web, making adjustments in Lightroom, trying out filters in Photoshop, anything quick and intermittent. That might not sound important, but you add all of those bursts up and they equal real time, especially for pros, for whom time is worth far more than money. That's Turbo Boost doing exactly what Turbo Boost is supposed to do. Linus also asked why
Apple considers it okay for even their professional grade computers to throttle like this, but not for their flagship iPhone. So why this difference in philosophy?
Again, he knows much more about this kind of stuff than I do, but I'll do my best to fill the cricket sounds with a pretty good guess. The consideration and philosophy are the same, to deliver what they think is the best product for the most customers. The only real difference is that Apple gets to custom match the silicon for that product on iPhone and iPad, and they don't, at least not yet, for the Mac. Linus thinks Apple is only throwing the biggest chips in the smallest packages for what he calls
low marketing.
Jonathan Morrison did a pretty comprehensive set of comparisons between the 2018 i7 and i9, so I'll just play you his conclusion.
Now I think this is going to end up being a multi-part series. In this first video, I'm going to tackle the i9 versus the i7 and kind of address the issue of if the more expensive i9 6-core is actually slower than the cheaper 6-core i7. And spoiler alert, it's not.
Link to the full video, of course, in the description. Perhaps even more telling though is what Apple did with the 2018 MacBook Air, launched it with only one processor option. And of course, some people were super upset by that decision too. But rather than
low marketing,
it could also possibly, just maybe be, that Apple is really trying to do what it thinks is best for each product line, including working around Intel's lack of process shrink as much as they can, including at the highest end possible. Because as we saw back in 2016, if Apple doesn't offer those highest end options, they get castigated for that as well. At this point, Linus smash cuts right into the sponsor read. Not for Skillshare though, that one is all mine. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 20,000 classes in photography, video, business, technology, everything you need to make your life better. Take Sam's course, for example. From the guy behind Wendover Productions and Half as Interesting, you can learn the steps behind creating a successful and interesting educational video for YouTube. One that, for example, could explain products as the sum and balance of many different parts. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. To sign up, visit the link in the description, and the first 500 visitors get 2 months of unlimited access to over 20,000 classes, for free. Act now and start learning today. Thanks Skillshare, and thanks to all of you for supporting the show. Again,
would a laptop PC achieve these results? And in fairness, the answer in many cases is no.
Again,
Our 2018 MacBook Pro with the fix applied closely matches or even beats our other Core i9 machines in CPU-heavy workloads like Adobe Premiere and Blender.
Again, that makes it sound more like a why are thin PCs slow video rather than anything particularly Mac exclusive. If we want to artificially constrain the conversation to maximum sustained performance, as though clock speed exists in a vacuum, that the speed benefits of other components, of macOS and Final Cut Pro 10 for example, of everything else doesn't matter, then sure. Apple could make different design compromises to prioritize that, but it wouldn't be for free. It would cost those other compromises, including size, weight, and fan noise, compromises that might not appeal to the vast majority of Apple's customers. No product is the sum total of one dimension or spec, and when we forget that or assume our own preferences and use cases should be everybody's, even most people's, and when we can't perspective take or empathize with the needs of real people in the real world, that's when both customers and audience lose out. So, in the meantime, if you do want Apple design and software and an i9, this is the engineering that lets you have exactly that. At least that's what I think. Hit like if you do, dislike if you don't, and please subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps out the channel. And then hit up the comments below and let me know whether you agree with Linus, agree with me, or have a different opinion entirely. I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next video.